What does a cruiser, a Grom, and a cafe racer have in common? Well, other than two wheels, me, unfortunately. I am going on an anniversary run to look back on the 2 years now that I've officially been in Korea. I mean, I technically moved in August of 2018. I was officially a resident that month, but in September, I managed to acquire a motorcycle, which would be the second of now 4 bikes I've owned in my entire life. This is my 4th bike. I was taking it out, and it was actually an almost identical day to go to the location where I took my original ride out. And it's strange to look back on that video and realize how different my mindset was then. And I guess you could say it was an act of desperation and impulse when I got that first bike versus what I have now. Anyway, the reason why I listed out 3 bikes is because I've had 3 bikes in the 2 years that I've been living in this country. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that I can't buy a bigger bike outright, even though I am fully endorsed in another country. Korea has different laws about motorcycle sizes. So technically I wasn't supposed to buy my first bike. At least I wasn't legally allowed to drive it. I didn't have a Korean license at the time. I didn't think it was an issue. And it probably still wouldn't be even now, but I'm not going to test it. I have the right size bike for the legalities of my license. Anyway, long story short, I had a cruiser that when I look back on my first video, you could tell that I was really nervous. I was really adamant. I wasn't comfortable. Whereas if I compare myself to my bike now, and even the Grom that I had prior to this, I felt more natural in it. I felt that it fit my taste. I felt that it was shaping my taste, if anything. And then eventually I found what I wanted, what I truly wanted, which was a cafe racer. Something I wasn't expecting to find here on the island, truthfully. I redid the route. I repeated it and almost to a T tried to recreate the video itself and how I edited it and the things that I saw. My first video, I missed the sunset. So I tried to make sure I wouldn't miss it this day. And I was not disappointed. If anything, this came out better, but maybe because I am 2 years older. I have a lot more experience under my belt, as it would come with time. And I have a bike that I can say right now was a natural fit. It was a natural transition from where I started, what I had before then, and finally what I will probably finish with in the time that I've had in Korea. This little cafe racer is not necessarily the smallest I've had, but certainly the most fun and more fitting of how I perceive myself on a bike, even though I don't really take pictures of me actually riding. My intent at some point would be to do that. I just don't have the tools or the means, or I don't know how. But I recreated the ride, and when I listened to how I described my feelings on the very first bike I had, the Hyosung Mirage was a 15-year-old bike. It was heavy, it was cumbersome, it didn't seem to move as nicely and as smoothly. It felt solid, but it just felt too big for me. Like I was not large enough to handle a bike like that. And it's interesting in retrospect to compare what I was then, how I thought about bikes then, which at that time was any bike would do, versus what I have now, and the realization that no, I can be more selective, I can be a little bit pickier. The routes that I take don't change. If anything, the routes get and the views get more pretty, or at least I appreciate them more. But I think a lot of it had to do with what I was riding at the time. So I appreciate the views now, even more so. But that was all I could think of. And on that first bike was, I don't want to crash. I don't want to tip over. I don't want to take a turn too quickly. I can't enjoy the ride as much as I should. And it's very obvious based on how I described it. So I am glad to say that my tastes have shifted a little bit. I am glad to have found a bike that I truly enjoy. But it took riding a big bike to appreciate what I have now. So don't underestimate those first few rides that you've had, or the first bike that you had, whether it was a hand-me-down, a piece of junk. That bike ended up being a lemon because it had a circuit problem. So in hindsight, I think maybe God was watching over me and said, I'll get you a bike, but understand this is temporary. And I can't thank him enough for that, because I managed to navigate speaking to Korean motorcyclists and how the process works. And now I can enjoy the views so much better, knowing that the ride that I have is not something I have to worry about. So here's to revisiting. It's called Chadwido, I think. Chadwido or Chadido. They don't say W's in Korea. I couldn't have picked a better day. The sun was out. It was a little bit nippy. The August humidity finally went off a little bit, I guess you could say. And I picked a perfect day to remember my first trip, because it was almost the same exact day 2 years ago. Same view. Some things have changed. Actually, in this parking lot, it's a lot more full compared to that first video. More people are here on the island. It is the destination right now, given the time. But I'm not going to complain about it, because I found what I was looking for, and hopefully I didn't have to go back.